Hello. I was a Jewish believer in Jesus for 42 years. I came to faith at the age of 18, and 42 years later I decided to do my faith an overhaul and to re-examine my beliefs and to re-examine in depth and in detail the Jewish reasons for not accepting Jesus as the Messiah. So I did a lot of research for months on end, and I reluctantly, and it was strangely regrettably, came to the conclusion, without a shadow of a doubt, that there was nothing in the Hebrew Scriptures that justified the belief that I held that Jesus was the Messiah. And I realised, because of the things Jesus said, which are quoted in the Gospels, he said that he had no place in Judaism at all. Now, I want to talk about in a very sort of matter-of-fact way. I'm not going to start quoting and things from the New Testament. Just, you probably all are familiar with the story of Jesus lashing out in the temple area, getting angry because he went into the temple area and he saw the money changers, and he got very angry, and he overturned the tables, and he actually went and made a whip of cords, and then he started lashing out. This, as obviously is, I've heard lots of views on this over 42 years, and most people come to the conclusion it's righteous indignation. That's one way of looking at it. I want you to consider another way. This is a man who's angry, and it's not in common with a lot of people. When they get angry, some people, they throw things, they overturn things. When people do that, they're usually in a rage. I trained as a psychiatric nurse, and the strength of people when they get angry, when they're psychotic and they get angry, you don't want to see. It is quite terrifying. Overthrowing a table that's already got full stuff on it. Can you imagine that? Imagine your dining table full of stuff and it's overturned. I mean, that is somebody in a real rage. This is not righteous. This is not just indignation. I mean, this is rage. This is rage. This is what you see happen. This is what happens in psychiatric hospitals when patients lose it and they're psychotic. They just go on a rage and they go on a rampage and they're throwing things, and the strength of them, what they can do. It is frightening. So he's overturning these tables. He's so angry. Think of any situation where you've encountered a man getting angry and he starts, or a woman even, but you can women include it, and they're throwing and they're overturning things and they're just grabbing things and they're throwing. They are in such a rage. You have to be in a rage to do that. There's one thing smashing a glass, and there's another thing getting that table and overthrowing it. That is real anger and rage. This is not being a bit annoyed. You also have to remember that Jesus chose to make a weapon a weapon. He chose to make something, an instrument, a weapon of violence, a whip of cords. He's doing that. He is so angry, he's in such a rage. It's like the man or woman going into that kitchen and grabbing that knife. It's no different. He is in such a rage. If he can't get that knife, then he's going to get something, and he's going to concoct it, and he's going to get some string, and he's going to wrap it round, and he's going to go up there. This is Jesus. Gentle Jesus. This is Jesus. Just rightly indignation. Sorry, this shows a man who's lost it. This shows a man who's lost it. He's made, in his rage, he's already overturned tables, and he's making an instrument of violence. And what he's going to do with it? He's lashing out. He's lashing out. He's not thinking. He's lost it. Who's around? Children? Elderly people? He doesn't care. He's not thinking. That's what happens when people lose it. And I've seen it. And they just lash out. They're not discriminating. Oh, there's a little old lady. I'll just move it and not lash. That's not how it works. When people are in that degree of a rage, where they're making something of violence and they're lashing out, it's the innocent that get hurt. The strong, those who can run. But those who can't run, those who just sort of freeze with terror, they're the ones that get hurt. You won't like to hear this, but I have to tell you, in today's world, he would have been sectioned without a shadow of a doubt. 2 psychiatrists would section that man Jesus if they saw that behaviour. The police intervening, they're getting him, restraining him. He would be sectioned without a shadow of a doubt. 2 psychiatrists would section him. And you know on what basis? The basis would be he's a danger to the public. He's a danger to the public. This is not a man who is lashing out because he's had a lot to drink. Because then they just take them to the prison cells. That's the drink. That's the explanation. Oh, he's had too much to drink. He's too much to drink. He's locked up in the prison cells till he sobers up. And then he can't even remember what he did because he was drunk. No. This is a man who's fully conscious and aware exactly what he's doing. He knows he's making an instrument of violence. He's making this whip of cords. And he knows what he's going to do with it. And he's lashing out. That shows you. That is very, very, very disturbing behaviour. I would have concerns about that. And I'm sure you would if you saw anybody behaving like that. Anybody. Whether it would be in a church, a synagogue, anywhere. You see somebody do that. You'd be terrified. You would be absolutely terrified. And mark my words, he would be sectioned. Because there would be a question mark. And don't you think afterwards people would have been frightened of him? Because I tell you I would. Word was quickly spread about that fellow. People would have been frightened of him. And I always got the impression that the disciples were rather wary and scared of Jesus. There wasn't this closeness that people keep going on about. I don't think they were close. I think, you know, if you look at him dispassionately as a character, as you would in a novel, and evaluate him, this is a man with ideas of what we call grandeur. That's a psychiatric term, the old-fashioned term. He believes he's God. Now, the Pharisees, people were impressed with him because he spoke as one with authority. But I could tell you as an ex-psychiatric nurse, when people believe they're God and things, they do speak with authority. And it's quite funny to, well, because it's in a psych, you have to remember, because you know they're not good. It's quite, when you have to have a sense of humour when you're a psychiatric nurse. You're not mocking the patient, but it is quite funny, you know, to watch where you've got somebody very ordinary and they believe they are, you know, divine, and they're on a roll and a rant, and they're talking and behaving as if they, because they believe perhaps they are God, or they believe they are the Prime Minister, or whatever they you know, they pick up, because if people, you know, picking up, you know, a lot, you know, people, like people think they're Napoleon, or they think they're Jesus, they're tacking on, they pick up people, and so I'm not surprised that that Jesus would behave as if he was God, because he believed he was God. It's all about what you believe, because what you believe affects the way you behave. We know this. It shows in your whole demeanour, doesn't it? Your face, the way you hold yourself, you speak, everything. You all know a confident person, the arrogant person, they hold themselves. Their attitude, the way they talk, the tone of voice. You know. And then you know the people are not. So when somebody like Jesus believes he's God's son, he's God, I and the Father are one, you can't come to, nobody can get to God except through you. Come through me. Me. It's all about me. He has ideas of grandeur, and because of what he believes up here, it's manifesting in the way even he holds his body, he speaks, everything, his tone of voice. No wonder people will be impressed. People will be impressed because this is like an actor almost, but remember, this person actually believes it. This person actually believes it. So he's going to behave and speak and use that tone of voice of absolute authority. And we all know the expression, oh, he thinks he's God, doesn't he? Or she thinks she's a queen, or, you know, there are, we've perhaps met at least one person in our life that we think they think they're above everybody else, and they talk and behave like they are something special, and you're thinking, you know, I'm not surprised. That it's no surprise. The fact that the Pharisees, you know, and those around him were impressed because he spoke as if he had authority, it's because he believed up here he had authority. He believed up here he was divine, he was God. And I think he is quite a complex character. And I always thought that way when I was a believer in Jesus. I thought, you know, I never really liked him very much. I don't think he's the sort of person you could have got close to. That is very, very apparent to me. That is very apparent from. I think there's something that people were slightly afraid of him. I get that feeling from the disciples. And these kind of people who think they are the authority, you know, they can be quite slightly intimidating. Even if they are saying wise things. Because you do get this with what's called charismatic, you know, leaders of different sects and things, and they have that charisma, but they can also be frightening because they believe they have this authority, because they believe it, that manifests in their tone of voice, their facial expression, the way they hold it, everything, because they are taken up here with how they think of themselves. And Jesus thought of himself in a very highfalutin way, and to such a degree and then he lashes out with violence in that temple area. You can compare that outburst with Moses when he came down the mountain from Mount Sinai with the tablets. While he'd gone up the temple, they built a golden calf. Well, you know the story. So so he's got a temper, so he throws it down. We all get that. Yeah. Throws it. He's angry. This is anger. It's not rage. There's a difference, you see. It's all about degree. He's angry. I could imagine him playing Merry Hell with Aaron, his brother. What the... bleep, bleep, bleep. Do you think you're playing it? What comes across with Moses is simply anger. And what they were doing actually was far more serious. Building. They'd made an idol and they're bowing down to an idol. And the response of Moses was anger. Simply, well, obviously his anger. He's very annoyed. But there's nothing from the text that suggests anything more. And you have to look at the context with Jesus. He's just simply losing his rag, going into a complete rage over something really not that serious. It's not as if people were in the temple area bowing down to the idols or anything. So this is just a religious matter that is perhaps a source of irritation, maybe. Irritation. I'm not very happy with this, what's going on. But his reaction, I would say, is not in proportion to the incident. You see, if people were bowing down to idols in the temple area, you might say, well, yes, you can't blame him getting angry. But that's not what's happening. You see, that's not happening. So what's happening is really on the scale rather small. But his response is totally, completely extreme and over the top. And that says to me someone who's not quite, from a mental health point of view, raises question marks. You won't like hearing this. You won't like hearing this. But I had these thoughts while I was a Jewish believer in Jesus. While I believed that he was the Messiah, I would have these kinds of thoughts and observations. And I think that's probably the main point that I want to make and for you to consider. Because it's a question about if Jesus is not the Messiah, if he's not who he is, then what on earth is going on with this guy? Now, when people say he is either who he is or he's mad, I think it's either one thing or the other, isn't it? But as we know, people have to recognise with mental illness and personality disorders, it's all very complex. And when, if you think of somebody mad, the first thing is somebody talking gibberish and just like... But there's certainly something going on. Because he's believing he's got these high ideas about himself. He's got sudden explosions of violence. As a character, he doesn't seem to be close to. He doesn't seem to be close to anybody. I think I would have been frightened of him. I felt like this the whole 42 years. I don't think there is anything. I've never ever felt that. There is something quite frightening about him. And it's this unpredictability of violence, and particularly over something not that big. And I don't think there's any harm in having these considerations about who he is. The Hebrew Bible, Torah, does warn us against things in the supernatural, the occult, and all sorts of things, because God was aware of there's a whole realm of things going on in this universe, most of which we can't see. I think people in other cultures like Asian and African countries do understand that out there's a whole realm of spiritual things going on. In this world we have different levels of authority of people, right? We have in all our structures, or in all of the universe, in all of the earth, there are tiers of authority for everything. Tiers. The higher you go, the more authority the person has. And what I know of the spiritual work, or the spiritual other things going on, and which people, I say, not in the West will appreciate because they will dismiss it, is that in the spiritual realm there are also tiers and different things going on. And that's why the God in the Hebrew Bible warns the Jewish people, don't have anything to do with this. Don't, because God was aware there's other things going on. There are other gods of this world. And he's saying, no, you only worship me. That's why the emphasis is saying worship me, because he knows there's other things going on out there, and which were out there and people were worshipping. And as we know with other cults and sects and all sorts of things around the world, and historically and in the present, people believe all sorts of things, strange, weird, incredible things can happen, do happen. People's religious beliefs, supernatural, believing in all sorts of weird things, all sorts of things. And it has powers, and how curses can take effect, and how to, in some religions curses are placed by somebody, and then the person gets sick, and then the family have to rush and find somebody else to break the curse. There's all sorts of things going on, and that's why God says stay away from all that. He doesn't want the Jewish people to get involved in that. Just stick with me. And so it poses the question about Jesus, because if he's not the Son of God, if he's not divine, if any of things were happening, you have to say, where is this power coming from? It's clearly not coming from God, because he's not divine. He is not God in the flesh. So what is he? He's something else. Christians will find this offensive, but remember, I held the same beliefs as you for 42 years. You have to question what's going on. If he could do any of these things, amazing things, where is the power coming from? And we know from the Hebrew Bible, the scriptures, God warns us there are other things going on in the universe, other powers. And we can be led astray by them. And they can be very convincing. As I've said before, Moses threw down his staff, it turned into a snake. Pharaoh's magicians threw their snakes down, the magicians, remember, and theirs turned into snakes too. And Moses' snake ate up the magician's snake. The fact that the magicians were able to create the same, they're creating exactly the same, but the power was demonstrated because he gobbled it up. So he's supreme. The God of Israel is supreme over all these other things that are going on in the universe that are amazing, people believe in. They believe in certain powers and things, so they levitate, and you think, oh, crap, it's amazing. You see these things? They're accessing other powers. And so the question is, if Jesus is not God, if he's not if he's nothing of that, what is he? Where is this power coming from? If things are happening in his name. Now, it is only Christianity that seems to be obsessed with perhaps trying to take control and manage the occult and those who perhaps believe in Satan and Satanism and things like that. It is only the Christian faith, using the name of Jesus, that is trying to take authority over all these other belief systems. Judaism doesn't. We've never had a history in the name of the God of Israel, Satan this and Satan. We just don't do that. We don't do that. We don't do that. We are not confrontational with all the other religious and different things going on in the universe on the other levels of the spiritual realm. In other words, basically what we've done is keep focused on God. Well, that's what we should be doing. Not have anything to do with idols, have nothing to do with anything occult, have nothing to do with magic, nothing. Keep focused on that's what we should be doing. And that is what traditionally we have done, is to try and keep focused on the God of Israel. Don't bother yourself with occult, don't bother with that, the other. Although some Jewish people do, we know that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it is the Christian that is obsessed and trying to take dominion with the name of Jesus over different occults and those who choose to worship Satan, Satan, whatever occult, all these other ones. They're trying to use their Jesus to take control over other things going on in the spiritual realm. Now, the Jewish people have never done that. We're not interested in that, because we've been commanded by God not to have anything to do with that anyway. The Jewish view is don't bother with it, ignore it, keep focused on God. And God himself says that. Don't have anything, don't be bothered, don't get involved with it. Stay away, have nothing to do with it. Keep focused on me. But the Christian doesn't. It's using the name of Jesus. They're trying to, they are got themselves embroiled in other spiritual things going on, and they're trying to take dominion over it. One thing I would suggest to you, and it's just a suggestion, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but we have to think about these things, is that if Jesus is not the Son of God, he's not God, then why has the name of Jesus having an effect, seeming to having an effect in the spiritual realms, as many Christians testify? And I am not saying they're lying. No, I can quite believe it. Perhaps what I would suggest is that Jesus himself is not God, but he himself is in the spiritual realm, like everything else, that God has said don't have anything to do with that. Now, in the spiritual realm, not the physical realm, they have tiers of authority. Anybody who knows about the occult and all the things, different things going on, knows it's all about authority. If a curse is placed on in some African, whatever, Asian countries, a curse is put on somebody, the person gets sick, the person has to find somebody else who has authority over the God whose curse it was used in. So a curse is being placed in the name of a God on a person to get sick. The person does get sick. The family are concerned. They have to find somebody to break that curse. But the only way the curse can be broken is the person who does it. It has to be somebody else who has authority over the God in whose name the curse was placed on it. Am I making myself clear? So another God has to take authority over that God and says, no, I'm going to break that curse that you put on that person. And they do it. They do it. I've heard it. I've seen it. They do it. You do hear this. So the spiritual things in the universe, there are tiers. And so one God has authority over another God. And then there'll be another God that has authority over that God. So there's a whole tier. Now, if Jesus is not God, then it could be that he is another tier in the spiritual realm that, if you use his name, will have authority over demons. Because if on the scale of things in the spiritual realm, if Jesus has authority over certain demons, then they will obey him. Because that's how the spiritual realms work. It works exactly the same as a physical realm. Just like on a lower tier, an ordinary rabbi has to obey the chief rabbi because he's the chief rabbi. An ordinary priest has to obey the Pope because he's the head of the church. Can you see this? And this is the same perhaps with a demon. The demon has to obey Jesus. It doesn't mean Jesus is God. It doesn't mean he's the Son of God. It means that he has authority over the demon in the spiritual realm. There are tiers. And Jesus is up there. Now, I'm looking at things from the point of view of people in the craft. Those who are practicing perhaps Satanism or the occult. You believe something, right? And you want to be left alone. And then you've got these Christians using the name of Jesus to try and demolish and attack what you're believing. The Jewish faith hasn't been doing this. We don't do this. We don't have a history of doing this. There is no history of the Jewish people trying to take authority over Satanism or the occult or anything like that. It is always a Christian taking the name of Jesus. And so, to be honest, looking at it from the occult point of view and from a Satanist point of view, it will be very irritating, and more than irritating. How dare you try and come against us? So it's like in the spiritual realm, you have these things, and you've got another person coming in, trying to demolish another realm, and this could be the reason why some Satanists will go into churches, and what they will do is they will take their excrement and put it in the chalice, and they will urinate into a cup. The reason why they're doing that is they're trying to put down this Jesus, right? So they're annoyed, rightly, from their point of view, not rightly so. I was going to say rightly so. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying from their point of view, they have certain beliefs. These Christians are trying to attack their beliefs and trying to take authority over their leaders. So you've got Satan, and I'm trying to I hope you can get where I'm coming from. And so you've got this name of Jesus being used against this Satan, and the Satan followers are annoyed about this because they're saying, well, and so they're annoyed, so they go into a church, they do this, and the reason is they're trying to humiliate and put down this Jesus who is the threat. Now, if Jesus isn't God, as we're saying, as I believe he's not, but he's just a tier in the spiritual realm, what you've got is a battle in the spiritual realms. It's got nothing to do with God. This is about the gods in the other realms, which include Jesus, And the Christians are using this Jesus the whole time, coming against other beliefs in the supernatural. And these people in the other beliefs are not, from their point of view, annoyed and angry. And that's why they're going to churches. You will never get Satanists going to synagogues and writing whatever. Whatever. They're not interested in the Jewish people. People in the cult aren't interested in attacking Jews. It's because we haven't attacked them. We have tried to obey God most of the time as a Jewish religion, and because we've been told by God, don't get involved with anything in the occult. Stay away. Keep focused on me. Have nothing to do with it. But the Christian doesn't. The Christian is fighting against this occult. That's these things going on in the spiritual universe, and they're using the name of Jesus, who is on that realm in the spiritual realm. He's not God, but he's on the tier. And there are different levels. And as I suggested, it could be that Jesus has authority over other levels in the spiritual realm. He's not God. But in the same way as in other continents, a curse is placed on somebody in the name of an idol or a god or whatever, a little spell, that the person gets sick, the family run, try and find somebody else who has authority, who believes in a God that is above the other God. They do another incantation, right? That will have an effect because that God is over the other God, and then the person gets better. And you do hear this, and it doesn't surprise me the least, because this is all about degrees of authority. And what we know from the Hebrew Scriptures and from that very clear, simple image of Moses and the staff turning into a snake and eating all the other snakes from the magicians is that the God of Israel has total and complete supremacy over everything in the spiritual realm. There are all sorts of shenanigans going on, but the God of Israel is supreme. He's supreme over it. And this is probably one of the final things about Jesus, that when I began to think about this, I suddenly realised, because I'd understood from the Hebrew Scriptures there was no evidence for Jesus being the Messiah, but when I considered this as well, I suddenly realised 100%. Because there is no reason that he might not have had powers. He could do things. But the fact that he could do things does not mean he's God. In the same way the magicians, Pharaoh's magicians, could throw their staffs down. It doesn't mean they're God. It doesn't mean they're God. It doesn't mean they're God. It does not mean they're God. These people that can levitate, does that mean they're God? No, of course it doesn't mean they're God. They're accessing powers in the spiritual realm in order to do it. The fact that these curses can work on people, they work. These curses work. They work. Curses work. Curses work. They have power. We all know that the words of our mouth have power. Have power. And this is what it's all about, is power. And so it's trying to juggle getting back to the temple and Jesus losing it, and the fact that if it happened nowadays, he'd be sectioned by 2 psychiatrists without a shadow of a doubt. Do you know when he'd be kept in that they would have to, it would probably possibly a diagnosis of a personality, won't like me saying this, there possibly would be a diagnosis of a personality disorder, that he's aggressive, so that suggests a paranoia. You don't like hearing this, but you have to consider this. If you are going to explore thoroughly whether Jesus is the Messiah or not. You do have to explore all this. It's very, very important. So he probably would have, I can tell you, he would get a personality disorder, possibly paranoid schizophrenic, and there would be a basis to it because of his behaviour. And wouldn't it be interesting to know that if Jesus had been put on antipsychotic medication at that time, how he would change? Wouldn't that be interesting to know? How would that personality change? If he'd been put on antipsychotic medication, would he have stopped believing that he was the way, the truth, the life? No one can come to the Father but by me. Because this is what ideas of grandeur do. And of course, psychiatric illness means in a certain degree a person is vulnerable. The powers out there, spiritual powers, perhaps taking advantage. And I'm just throwing all these different ideas because I know things aren't necessarily cut and dry, but I'm throwing these ideas for you to consider. I don't consider it's blasphemy. I had these kinds of ideas when I was a Jewish believer in Jesus. You know, I thought around, but even more so, you know, I would think and wonder, but, you know, that's what I was thinking. So while I was believing in that Jesus, I was thinking these things, and you say, well, that's Satan. No, it's not. It's just me thinking. Christian, I want to say to you, you give too much authority and power to that Satan that you believe exists. You give him too much authority and power. And you have to understand that as a human being created by God, you are above any Satan. God has given you a mind of your own. He's given you intelligence. He's given you the ability to reason, to understand, to reevaluate information. He has given you intellect. And in no way has God created you so that you are so inept and so inadequate as a human being that you are controlled, totally controlled by an outside force, so that you cannot and unable to believe in the God of Israel and what he requires of you and what he doesn't require of you. In what I am saying to you, Satan has no power over any human. He does not have that complete power and authority over you. And you have to understand this from your own religion and ideology. You have to even understand this from the words of Jesus. I'm telling you this. That you think he has so much power that God has created a Satan that will totally prevent you from knowing and understanding what the God of Israel wants from you. No, absolutely no. Absolutely, categorically no. You have to understand God is the creator of the whole universe. That Satan that you think has so much power was created by God. Every living creature, every angel, everything in this universe has been created by God. And they cannot, they do not have the power or the authority, and God would not allow it for you to be so consumed by them that you would be unable at any time to be able to escape and follow the laws of God and to do what God requires of you. You have to understand that. Stop giving that Satan so much power and authority. Stop using him as an excuse. Stop using it as an excuse. God has given you a brain. He's given you intellect. He's given you the Hebrew scriptures. You have the capacity to reason. You come to a decision based on the information you have, like I did 42 years ago, even though I had reservation. You then are presented with new information that you didn't have. You now have to reevaluate everything. And your views and your beliefs change accordingly. This is how it works in the universe. This is how God has it. So you understand with the information and you make an informed decision based on the information you have. This is what justice is about. When you go to jury service, you are making a decision based on the information you have. Now, we all know there are miscarriages of justice, and you know why that often happens. It's because people, the jury, don't get all the information. The defence lied to them. The prosecution lied to them. You cannot always get the justice that you want in this world because you're not getting all of the information. Right? When God makes his judgment, God has all the information. So all the ways of God are just because he has all the information. He has everything. So that's why God is just. He has everything. So you know God is just because he has all the information. You don't have to worry about a miscarriage of justice. Or has he got all the information? Does he know about this? Does God know? Of course he knows about it. And you must stop. You must stop thinking that Satan has so much authority. He doesn't. He doesn't. You need to recognise that. You have authority over him. You're created by God. I have a guinea pig, but I have authority over my guinea pig. She doesn't have authority over me. We've been told to God to have authority and dominion in this world. You know, do you not realise who you are? And so often I think the Christian slips into almost a superstitious sort of mindset. And you get things all out of proportion. And you are obsessed and go on and on about this Satan, but this comes from your New Testament. Because we don't in the Hebrew scriptures. He's hardly mentioned. And rightly so. He's not important. He's not important. What's important is God. And you have to get back and get focused solely on God. Solely on God. Solely on God. And start using your brain for once. Start using your brain. Christianity, in my experience, from my observation, does not use its brain in regards its scriptures or its religion, anything. I've heard it and seen it for so long, and I used to think to myself in churches over the years, what is the matter with these people? They are so smart, they're clever, they've got degrees, they're far cleverer than I am. And they're using the brain. They're using the brain when the doctors are using the brain when the scientists are using the brain over computer technology. Are they using the brain when it comes to the scriptures? No. And you show utter and complete contempt for the rabbis who are using the brain, who are thinking, who are interacting with scriptures. You could be such a smarter people if you just learn to not be afraid and to think and question. Think and question. I have been to I've been to study theology. And I've thought, what is the matter? And it's a cultural thing. And Christianity has a history of stifling all discussion and all questioning, because in Christianity all questioning is doubt. For instance, the resurrection. Jesus says, so the apparition says to Thomas, why do doubts rise in your mind? Well, I'll answer you. I'll tell you why doubts rose in his mind. Because Thomas saw a man crucified, dead and buried, declared dead, and he was buried. That's why. My late mother died, and I can remember, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, it's awful, awful. I remember walking behind a woman, a couple of weeks later, I can still remember it, and I thought it was my mother. It happened years later with my late father died. It is not uncommon when somebody dies for you to see somebody and think it's the person that's recently passed. This is very, 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 very common. But the Christian is so cruel. If that scenario had happened, poor Thomas, it's understandable. Well, if you're, think of it, if a relative of yours dies and then he appears to you. No, it's a, and that, it's never, you never hear the end of it, doubting Thomas, doubting Thomas. What Thomas was doing was questioning what he was seeing in front of him. He'd seen Jesus dead and buried. Dead and buried. He'd been to the funeral. He shiver, for heaven's sakes. And then this apparition is in front of him. And wouldn't you sort of, what the hell's going on here? This is the cruelty of Christianity. You ask a question, a legitimate question, and they turn on you. You doubter, you unbeliever, you heretic. Off with your head. You're doubting the resurrection. Well, yes. And with good reason too. But we're going off into another subject. But I just throw that in. Because in so many ways, the outworking of Christianity can be so very, very cruel. It's a perverted, I always felt sorry for that Thomas. I always felt sorry for him. And he's up and down, he's talked about through churches all the time. That doubting Thomas, that doubting Thomas. But I'm going off the point now, and I suppose now's the time to end because we're nearly come up to an hour. But I hope that you've got something to think about from what I've said. And I do apologise if I veer to the left and right, which I tend to do. I know sometimes. I do. It's not good. But I do suffer from severe chronic fatigue, and I find it that what is one of the problems is always keeping focused. I can keep focused so long, and then I'm suddenly easily diverted. But I hope that you will just think and reflect, and I hope this has not been a wasted hour for you, and that you've got something to think about and to consider.